Somebody the other day was like, give me an answer of how to be successful. And I looked at them and I said two things. I go, work hard and be nice to fucking people. That's all it is. Be good to people and work your ass off. At everything you do, work your ass off. You're going to be successful.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. Once again, we have a very special guest, another Canadian. I think you're like the third Canadian I've had on here. Host of Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneur Podcast and author Jeff Lopes. How's it going?
Good, brother. I'm excited to be here. We had you on our podcast and it was an absolute hit. A lot of good feedback from it. So I'm excited to have another conversation with you.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't swear too much. I try to keep it. When I do other people's shows, I try to at least pretend like somebody raised me properly, I guess.
No, you did good. I was trying to get you on my podcast. We both know this for a while, and your schedule it was always conflicting. So, you never know the response of the audience, and I was very shockingly surprised of how positive the response was. And when I mean response, I mean feedback. People actually messaging me and liking a lot of stuff. You got the odd person that threw against the wall, but I mean those are the ones that, as we spoke to before we got on air, those are the ones that follow the kind of the herd, right?
Yeah. So I mean, just to recap, we did discuss a few things before we started the show. I was kind of giving you an intro into what we're doing here. The more of these shows I do, the more I refine the ideas behind it, I think, which is the point. You know, it's the reason I'm doing the show in the first place. But I think in modern Western life, the most important choice that all of us are faced with is whether we're going to be citizens or whether we're going to be subjects. And to clarify the difference between the two, a subject is somebody who's being ruled, right? And in a society like ours, especially here in North America, the United States and Canada, but also other Western countries, typically what it means to be ruled is that you've willfully, in today's world without actual feudalism and dictatorial rule in the West, it means that you've subjugated yourself through your own laziness or ignorance or incompetence, right? Certainly there are bad actors that are always going to be around to take advantage of power vacuums and try to, lord over people. But we're in a unique period in human history where we have all the information we could ever want. We have the opportunity to be entrepreneurial on our own. And at least in my estimation, the thing that's really stopping us from having a society that reflects the ideals upon which these countries were founded, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, individual liberty, things like that. The thing that's really stopping us is our own inability, or maybe we just don't want to take control of what's going on, right? So that's kind of the general theme here. Whereas a citizen is, as I've laid out the definition a number of times on the show, someone who doesn't simply enjoy their rights or focus on their rights, but also understands that they have responsibilities, right? And that make those rights possible, not just for you, but for everybody else as well.
Yeah. I mean, if I could jump in there quickly, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, it all starts with two main narratives. One is parenting, and how children are brought up and how, I mean, we're indirectly teaching our children at all moments. And I think a lot of parents try to directly teach their children lessons, but it's indirectly how they treat others. Have they opened a door? Are they taking leadership skills? Are they evolving? Are they entrepreneurs? Your children are indirectly learning off you from a very young age. So I think that's the kind of the seed that's starting, right? And the next seed is our educational system. The educational system just vacuums everybody into this trap where their mind is, I got to get to university, I got to get to college. And when they get there, now they have no choice because we're not building leaders. The educational system is not trained to train leaders. It's trained to essentially put everybody in a herd mentality where they're done school. Now they got 5 to 10 years to pay their tuition. And now they're stuck working a 9-to-5 job. They're stuck following the herd. And then once that happens, add social media, add people want to be part of something. So now they're stuck to this 9 to 5 job. They're depressed. They're unhappy with their life. They get home, they put on social media, and they want to feel part of something. And they start following these groups, following these herds, and it just evolves. It's almost like a snowball effect from there.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because that, in a lot of ways, that's some of that stuff's going to happen naturally. We had William Roosh on the show recently. He's a primary educator, so I think he's a high school teacher that teaches history mostly.
Yeah.
And we kind of went through the paces on what public education not just has become. I think it's a misnomer to say that's what it's become, because it's what it's always been about, and that's to produce compliant workers. That was the point of this. It's a factory to produce compliance, and that's, it's definitely not good for so we're in a creator economy now, right? So more so than ever before in human history, people have not just the ability, but the resources to start your own business or whatever it is. And in a lot of ways, divorce yourself from a lot of the problematic stuff that happens in the corporate world. But our primary and secondary education does not reflect that. It's still a mill, right? That's trying to churn out the same product over and over. But it does, at the end of the day, it still starts at home. Right. So whenever we're, elucidating all these problems in the world, I always want to take the time to remind people that this is a problem that we created, either through complacency or ignorance or whatever it is. And that sounds accusatory. It kind of sucks that you have to accept responsibility for it, but it also means you have the ability to change it. And I think that's the empowering part, right? So if we made this problem, we're the ones that could solve it.
100%. And when you're saying starting at home, I mean, you're looking at, we could go back to corporate America or even North America, Canada. Like when you're stuck on a corporate job working 9 to 5, or you're trying to be an entrepreneur, the hours you put into your career, and especially when you have young children, there's got to be a balance. And you always hear a lot of massive entrepreneurs saying it's impossible to have a balance between family life and being an entrepreneur. And I think that's bullshit. You could have a balance. It's learning how to prioritize your schedule, learning how to prioritize your time. And if you do have half an hour with your children, make sure you're being present at that moment and educating them, teaching them, making use of that time with them. And I think a lot of parents don't do that. And that's the kids. And I got a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, Dan, and I can still look at my daughter 16 and I can think of her changing her diaper. It just flew by. So I'm looking at her and I'm like, okay, I think I've done a decent job as a dad. I've got her into a situation where from day one with both my kids, I made them as independent as I possibly can. My daughter is 16. We come home, dinner's ready. She cleans. She has laundry done. She's a high performance dancer. She's a straight A student. And it's because from day one, we instilled discipline. We instilled a work ethic, which is so important, a work ethic from a very young age. And we didn't give them anything. We made them earn everything from a very young age. And I think that's the biggest issue is people get into a situation with their children is just constantly giving. They don't make them earn, work, or get in a situation where they feel they have to accomplish something to get rewarded for something.
Yeah,
that even goes. Sorry, go.
No, it's interesting because a lot of people who feel the way you feel routinely will talk about this circle of hard times, make hard men, make soft times, make soft men. But it does seem like it isn't just the soft times we made that contributed to this problem. It's the fact that we became soft ourselves and stopped, requiring this level of discipline from people. And it's a problem of perspective, I guess, because 200 years ago, that discipline literally keeps you alive, and now it just makes your life better. So it's hard. It is true to say that it makes your life significantly better, not just in experience, but in health, mental health, and all this other stuff if you have that level of discipline. But I think maybe one of the problems we're having is juxtaposing that versus, the pioneer environment where you literally have to do these things or you die versus, well, it would be better if I do those things.
Yeah.
But even that is kind of a misnomer because now something like, I think 58% of Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic or something like that. Like it's over 50%. Are either currently diabetic or pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
So it does actually have an effect on whether or not you're going to live or die. And we have an obesity epidemic in America. You know what I mean? Far more dangerous than any other epidemic we've seen in our lifetime, for sure.
Why do you think the government's not? When we've talked about this, and I've talked about this endless times on podcasts, why do you think the government? Is it because the pharmaceutical companies? Why do you think the government doesn't put emphasis on making that a magic subject to people to focus on and educate on?
Well, I mean, they would have to. I've said this before. It's almost like the spent cost fallacy, but it's the cost that you spent isn't just time. And spent cost fallacy, it's someone has spent so much time and effort on something that even though they know it's failing, they won't stop. You know what I mean? Because I've invested this much, I may as well continue going. Well, that doesn't make sense. Like if you followed a path to its end, you wouldn't keep walking into the woods. You would stop, turn around, and find the rest of the path. But it's not just time and effort that has been spent in this scenario. It is the patrician classes, the weight of their authority, right? How much people respect and trust them has also been spent. And I know that that's a dicey thing for them because if they admit now how wrong they were about things like mandates and lockdowns and masks and corn syrup, back to this point, the government allowed all that stuff to happen. The FDA promoted corn syrup.
Yeah,
which
for
is
years and years and years. Yeah.
Which before, I said this on the show the other day with our buddy Dr. Mike Simpson, but before corn syrup was in most foods throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s, it was used to fatten pigs for slaughter. You know what I mean? So I think a big part of it is that spent cost fallacy. They've been so wrong so much that to admit that actually being healthy, I mean, look at how much and this is a really good comparison in my opinion, the 8 years that Obama was in office here, Michelle Obama's primary goal was health and fitness of kids, right? To change school lunches from bullshit chicken nuggets and pizza to, maybe a vegetable now and then. And the right lit her up for it. Like, you shouldn't get to decide what my children eat. Like, this isn't one of those my freedom situation, dude. Your kids are eating bullshit and they're going to die in their fucking 40s because of it. And this isn't a political issue. But it shows you how little trust people have in these institutions now. Like, even when the institution is right, nobody trusts them anymore, depending on which side of the political aisle the institution happens to be on, right? But that's fucking dumb. So I think maybe we need to do a better job of educating people. And I don't know if it's to have them imagine themselves in a pioneer environment where, the consequences are real. I mean, it's hard to compare getting overrun by a gang of horse thieves or dying from cholera or dysentery to, the 40 years it takes to die from diabetes. You know what I mean? But we have to do a better job of explaining that to people because clearly they're not getting it.
I mean, I had on my podcast Dr. Kian Vu. He's a longevity coach. He's an MD longevity coach, and we had this conversation about 3 weeks ago. And I mean, he still thinks there's hope. I mean, having the right amount of people bring it to the light and educate people as much as possible. I feel a little more negative with it because I feel like it's you've put people in this narrow door of it's cheaper in a low income area. It's cheaper to grab a burger than it is eat a healthy meal. So I think that a big part of it has to start off with the home. So educating people, but also financially, right? A lot of people, it's a lot simpler to grab a fast food than go home and cook a delicious meal. So it has to start one from educational system, teaching kids from a younger age, but the parents, you're looking at generations before this will start becoming a habit in their lifestyle, right? So how are we going to start it from the educational system, teaching them properly, starting the school system, like you said, Michelle Obama started, and getting it into a lot of the lower income areas where people now could eat. And there are programs now. There's a lot of programs that people are doing with getting vegetables that are a day, 2 days past due that are still good, and lowering the value of them. There's tons of people really trying to do good in this world, so which gives it hope, right? When you see people actually trying to do these programs to help educate people to provide lower income families with a healthy nutritional meal. But it's, you're looking at the numbers are so high, and then when you get the government, we've been through this, we've talked about this, the government shutting you down, forcing you to stay at home, and not making you move, not making you exercise. I'm coming from Toronto, Canada. Our lockdown mandate here was horrible, and telling you to stay home, telling you what to do, and once again the herd mentality just follows. How many people got depressed? How many people gained weight? How many people got out of shape? You had the odd family that really took that and say, hey, this is the time to really focus on ourselves. That was such a low demographic that actually did that. So when I look at it, the overall picture, yeah, there's a lot of people trying to do good, like Dr. V and other people like that. But there's still, when you're looking at society in general, I mean, the pharmaceutical companies, the cereal companies, you walk to a checkout of a Walmart, what do you turn around? It's all junk food at the checkout. They make everything convenient as possible. Grocery store, you go to any grocery store, you're going there for milk and eggs. What are they forcing you to do? They're forcing you to walk through every aisle to the back corner to get that milk and eggs. There is a marketing strategy between everything they do to force us to buy that junk food, to feel that comfort food. And that's just adding to the diabetes, adding to the cholesterol problems, adding to the health problems, adding to the heart disease. And it's a snowball effect. And I don't see a positive end to it unless dramatic change starts from day one with children.
Yeah, I don't think any of the modern issues that we face dovetails more aptly into my general theory about citizen versus subject than our diet, because
Yeah.
nobody, like there's certainly food deserts, and that creates problems, and it's certainly more convenient and faster to do certain things versus other things, but there's a time and place for convenience, right? So having energy, the most amount of energy in every home, that improves people's lives. There's no question about that. It extends people's lives. It makes the quality of life better, all these things. But having the convenience of, low nutritional calories, for example, not a good thing. But it's something that we've chosen to take part in when we had the option to not do that. And, I mean, I understand the frustrated parent that's just trying to get their kid to eat something, you know what I mean? But every time you take a shortcut, man, it never seems to work out. And this is a problem that we've forced on ourselves. Like we did not have to do this. There's a meme floating around right now. I actually had to look it up to see if it was legit or not, but it was the fattest man in the world. It was at a carnival. And that was his tagline, was the fattest man in the world. And I think he weighed like 300 pounds. Like, dude, you go to fucking Las Vegas right now and you can see 400 pounders riding around on motorized scooters. You know what I mean? And it's like, what the hell's going on here? To your point about the government and its motivations, the more conspiratorial side of me, because why did they shut down gyms as well? You know what I mean? Like, that was weird. The more conspiratorial side of me wonders at what level of incompetence is Malice then implied. It's like the inverse of Hanlon's razor. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to be wrong and then say you were wrong and say, but this is right and here's why we were wrong and stuff like that. But to say I am the science, for example, and continually promote bullshit while at the same time having private corporations in the form of social media companies shut down dissent. Now that's literal fascism. The
Yeah.
the coordination between private business and government to spread disinformation and rule over people, that is the literal definition of fascism. So I think we should probably pay a little bit more attention to that. It's why I made this list of principles, because people need, I feel like when an idea pops up, it's almost like going through the Socratic method, like going through your checklist. Okay, does it meet this standard? Does it meet this standard? Does it meet this standard? And I think that ideas like supporting and defending liberty and helping all men and, being a leader, no matter where you are, putting more into things than you get out of them, things like that, rejecting divisiveness. I feel like these things, man, they're good bullets on a checklist to make sure that the actions you're taking in your life are positive, not just for yourself, but for others and for society at large.
It's structure, right? I mean, I look at everything you're doing and everything you're saying there is a structure to follow. And when you have structure, it allows the process to work a lot better, no matter what you do. And going back to what we were talking about, I mean, if you think of even the 2000s, I'm assuming we're roughly pretty close in age. When you're looking at the 2000s, when all those fat-free foods started coming in, what were they injected with? Sugar. And the amount of sugar that people were just reading on a label, fat-free, and they're buying it fat-free. And I fell under that category. Many people fell into that category. I'm on a diet. I'm going to buy everything fat-free. What is happening? The diabetes epidemic just exploded because everybody, those things are now, to get rid of the fat, they got to increase the sugar to make it taste better. So all of a sudden that happens. When they started all of a sudden saying sugar-free, now they're putting aspartame. Aspartame has links to cancer. So it's just this one band-aid over another, but the end result is these massive corporations are all profiting billions and billions. And as long as they keep doing that, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop the issue. They're just going to keep putting band-aids on it or switching it around. And that's the biggest issue when it comes to us eating, right?
Well, I mean, you can see from just the way it's played out historically what the goal is. The goal is not to produce a happier and healthier society. It's to maximize profits. You know what I mean? Yeah. I like to tell people the harder somebody's trying to convince you of something, the less likely you should be to believe it, because good ideas in and of themselves are pretty convincing and obvious typically, right? Like these brilliant ideas that people come up with from time to time, whether it's in science, or philosophy or whatever it is, it's one of those things where you hear it and you're like, wow, that's really simple. Why didn't I think of that? That's typically what truth sounds like because it feels right to people. Now you take a lot of lessons from business through your business career, through your 25 years in business, and translate them for people who are trying to figure out how to navigate those things. But they aren't just business lessons. I find that you record not just how to operate in a startup or in a boardroom or whatever, but also how these lessons have informed your life as a man, as a husband, as a father, and so on. And I think it reminds me of Colonel Hal Moore once said that one of his lieutenants asked him how he managed being both a father and a soldier, and he said, "Well, I hope one thing makes me better at the other." Right? And I think it's like the lessons we learn from how to deal with things ethically in business, or how to deal with things from a structural and educational standpoint as parents or educators or leaders in other ways. They do certainly inform each other. You've kind of made a business out of this.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at everything, there's a process and structure to everything you're trying to build. And I think a lot of people don't create a proper process and actually finish to the end with it. And when I'm talking about that is whether you're creating a business, you're trying to create a great family life. I mean, I've been married for 19 and a half years, creating an environment that my wife and I still communicate after 19 and a half years, having both busy careers, having two active children. is you have to put in the time. And how do you put in time when you have a busy schedule? Is, I mean, I call it my non-negotiables. When I look at my schedule, Dan, I literally lock in, I actually physically lock in time with my kids on my schedule. And I say between 4 and 6 to K, I'm going to be do baseball with my son. Between 3 and this time, I'm going to do this with my daughter. Every night when our kids go to bed around 9:30, me and my wife, that's our time together. We go for a power walk for 30, 40 minutes. It's actually putting in non-negotiables into your schedule and understanding that to build anything, you have to put effort. Somebody the other day was like, give me an answer of how to be successful. And I looked at them and I said two things. I go, work hard and be nice to fucking people. That's all it is. Be good to people and work your ass off at everything you do. Work your ass off. You're going to be successful. It might take a little longer, it might take a little shorter. It all depends on the lucky breaks we get, because we're all going to need a lucky break here or there, or a network or a person we meet that takes kind to us and helps us along the way. But that's all it is. And then when you are trying to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to invent the wheel. A lot of people try to invent the wheel. Find somebody that's been successful. Find somebody that's in a spot that you want to be in, and study what they've done. Learn from them. Allow them to be your mentor. If they don't want to be your mentor, study what they've done, and create your own wheel by duplicating theirs, just adding your own touches to it.
Right.
I think a lot of people overcomplicate shit. And I've been an entrepreneur now for 26 and a half years, and I've been very successful. We got 9 properties. We have Comore where we design and manufacture boxing martial art equipment, which we do extremely well with. We have other little businesses, and through the whole process, I don't complicate shit. There's going to have ups and down valleys of good days and bad days. You have to realize that it's a long-term game. You're not going to try to get rich quick. It's a long-term game. And through the process is all about the networking, the communication, the building the relationships, and keeping the ones that you have strong as well. So there's not rocket science to being successful. It's just putting the damn hard work in and being smart with it, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I've had these conversations before about scheduling time with the people in your life, and not just that, but like side business projects. So let's say, I've got this really good idea. I think it would make a good podcast or a good book or whatever. I mean, you got to put 30 minutes a day aside for that, or 2 hours a day aside, or however long it is, right? Yeah. That makes sense. We schedule time for the gym. We schedule time for personal development or professional development. And then when it comes to the most important part of our lives, in my opinion, which is your personal life, because not only is it enriching your life and making it possible for you to do all the things you're doing, but you're also creating new human beings that are able to go out and duplicate that effort, and it makes their lives better, and it makes your life better, and it makes all of our lives better, right? We fall short of that. I think I've heard feedback that some people think that it kind of cheapens the idea of family time and stuff like that, or time with your wife, for example. If you put it on a schedule, I mean, why? I don't understand that. Like, everything doesn't have to be spontaneous and romantic. If you live like that in your head, you're going to be always disappointed. Those people are like, that kind of relationship fizzles out pretty quickly, because in everything you do in your life, structure is going to be one of the more important parts of it, right?
Yeah, it's structure and understanding. I mean, I've been married, like I said, Dan, for 19 and a half years. My wife has her career. I've been always an entrepreneur. She has understanding and a trust in me that when I make a decision to try a new venture or buy a new property or try any idea, she has a trust in me. I built that trust that she backs it up and supports it. So we have that great communication aspect. But we've been married for 19 and a half years, and we found what works for us. And what works for us might not work for other people. 19 and a half years, we don't have a bank account together. We have our own separate time. We have time scheduled that we're going to spend together. So we have a very structured relationship, but we don't argue. We don't argue about money. We have a great relationship. We understand our time is needed around the children to develop them into good human beings. So because we from day one have had this structure and understood this, I mean, and some people might say it sounds robotic, but it's not. We have a great loving relationship because we set the boundaries and the rules from day one, and we've both appreciate being open and honest of how we have to conduct our lives to be successful individually and as a team, kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think, you need that understanding, and it's good to go through the process too. I mean, if you're young in your relationship, be really clear about what your expectations are.
Yeah.
Right up front. I mean, there's this kind of unwritten rule that a person can fake their behavior for the first 6 months, 3 to 6 months or something, and then they become their real selves. I would take that personally. Like, you need to, if that is indeed something of a standard, and you're out there in the dating world still, you should really make it an effort to not do that personally. I think that's obvious, but you should also make an effort to make it easier for your potential partner to be honest about things as well. You know what I mean? And do so. Like, you should go into things with I'm not saying be skeptical or cynical about things. You should be skeptical, but not cynical. But definitely go into things with your eyes open, because you've only got the time on this earth that you have, you know, and wasting it with somebody who doesn't align goal-wise. Like, look, the relationship's always going to be work, because that's what it's work. It's just the way it is. But if you align yourself with somebody who you're just not on the same page with, it's why somebody like you do all the things you do and you have a great relationship, and people are like, oh, it just comes easy for them. No, you just did it the right way. You know what I mean? Like, if you try to run up a hill backwards, it's going to look tougher than just walking up the hill forward. But that doesn't make one, I mean, technically the event itself is more difficult the way you're doing it, but getting up the hill was a lot easier for me because I did it the right way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think the honesty, I love what you're saying there, Dan, with the honesty from day one, because we both went in this relationship. My wife knew I started my first company at 17. When we met, I was just about 19, and we got married. I got married, I was turning 28, and we dated for the first 6-7 years, just off and on. We had very, like, a relationship where it was like we weren't up each other's ass kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We understood we're trying to both build our careers. But from day one, she knew what she was getting. She knew she was getting an entrepreneur that would never work for somebody. I'd rather be squeeging cars on the side of the road than actually take orders by somebody. I've been like that since I was a kid. So she knew what she was going to get. And I knew that she was a very more laid back, simple person. She never wanted to be an entrepreneur. She knew she would never work for me or none of my corporations, because her thing, when people ask, like, how do you even work for your husband? She says, I want to stay married. I don't want to be divorced. And she said that from day one. So we both came in with this open honesty. So we knew what we were at the beginning and knew how to navigate and grow together. So there's no bullshit or lies from the beginning, which I think is so valid, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I want to move on into some proactive things. Again, as I said at the top of the show, and as we discussed before, it's become kind of trendy to talk about how fucked up everything is, and how, you know, politicians suck, and the state of the world's bad, and people are I don't understand why people vote for these things or those things, or I don't understand how this is happening. It's easy to believe that government has failed us and institutions have failed. There's a lot of truth in that, but I think if you consider, like, we've allowed all this, right? Because we've allowed ourselves to be ruled through a popularity contest, and we've taken no interest in the governing of our own communities. So people that are power hungry have naturally gravitated towards those places, and we've been content for a very long time just to choose between the lesser of two evil, power hungry people. And that's how our government's been run for a very, very long time now. Like, I'm not talking about the last 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. I'm talking about maybe the entire history of this country, you know, after the first couple of presidents. So as much as government has failed us and some of the systems have failed us, I think that we are primarily responsible for this. I think that, especially here in America, where it's of, for, and by the people, you should consider the population and local government as a feeder system for federal government, state and federal government, right? Because if it is truly of, for, and by the people, and the people suck, then of course the government's going to suck. And it doesn't matter what your individual quality is. It matters what your individual effort is. Like, you can only control two things in life: your attitude and your effort. And our attitude and
Yeah.
our effort towards politics in this country have been bullshit for a long ass time, a lot longer than we've been experiencing these recent times of tumult, for lack of a better phrase. So I wonder, from your perspective, and you're in Canada as well, which is the way that your government. I've tried to intimate this to people over the past 2 years or so, but the way that your government has handled like ESG and the World Economic Forum, and then lockdowns and all that stuff, and mandates, is far worse than what happened here in the United States by a pretty significant factor. So you're in a much more dire situation, I think, than most people here are. What advice do you have for people on how to reclaim their sovereignty? You know what I mean? From the ground up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, exactly what you said. And this has been going on for quite a few years here, and I don't see getting any better. But I mean, there's different starting points. I mean, you could work towards your local community, your local government, and start in that process, and trying to put the right people in place. But most people are just so busy with their everyday life that they just fall into this pattern that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We'll let tomorrow happen. We'll be okay. And there's isn't much change. And I fall into that pattern. I'm going to be honest with you, because I see all these things happening when you're looking at our government. I mean, the world looks at the Canadian government like he's a communist. I mean, that people say that on a regular basis. And when you're looking at as a political standpoint, I mean, as an individual, how much power, how much change could I do? So my mindset is being able to control the things in my life that I'm able to control. And what I mean by that is I could control creating a great business. I could control educating and teaching my children the goods and bads and how to be good human, and what as a young adult, how to enter the world and how to react to certain things that are going to happen to you. I could sit down with my wife and have that discussion. I could sit down with my neighbors. So it starts from the home base, the neighbors, your family, and really trying to educate. When you get to the point, educate people on the proper manner of how to conduct themselves on a regular basis. I think if you're looking at trying to solve the Canadian government issues or the North America government, you're not, as an individual, you're not going to do nothing.
Right.
And personally, I don't want to run for politics. I don't know if your mindset is to run for politics eventually, but I mean, as an individual, you got to just be able to control the things you control, and the things that are out of your control, don't stress about it. Just try to, in the best manner as possible, educate people on what you feel is correct. And by that, like I said, building corporations, hiring people, building communities around you that you feel that you're helping better and grow and educate people. Like I said, whether it's through diet, whether it's through politics, is you have a standard or in your head, and you got to educate the people around your circle. And then it starts from there, and you're hoping that group will start educating other people, and it slowly starts growing. But it's such a huge hill to change, and the climb right now, and I don't see it changing. I mean, last year during the pandemic, Trudeau called an election during the pandemic and got reelected. Like, during the pandemic, when people were going crazy, he called an election, and people were like, "What?" And then 2 weeks later, he was back in it, locked down again. Like, and people were just like, "What the hell just happened?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you see this, like, how much control do I have? The only control I have is in my home, in my businesses, and my family and environment. So you try to work from there and grow it from there. But man, it's you just have to add. I mean, my mindset, Dan, is you have to just find a way to be successful and be a good person. We're on this earth for such a damn short time, in a very short time. And I mean, I live every single day, and I've always lived like this, but I lost my dad 15 months ago, and he was very close to me. And in my mindset is I live with no regrets every single fucking day. I wake up every day. If I want to do something, I do something. I mean, lockdown has prevented us for about 2 years, but I've always wanted to watch a Cubs game. Last weekend, we jumped in the car, drove across the board, and went to Wrigley to watch a Cubs game. Checked off my checklist. It's you got to live every single day as if you have zero regrets. You're living to your fullest, and you're doing what you want. You're not falling in the herd mentality where I got to do this, I got to do this. No, you do what the fuck you want and I'm sorry for swearing, on a regular basis, and do stuff that can fulfill your life and fulfill your family's life to the max, and worry about yourself and stop trying to follow the rules. Through the whole pandemic, they're like, you can't see your family, you can't do this. I saw my parents 3 4 days a week. I would drive down to Toronto and go spend time with them. Thank God I did that, Dan, because months later my dad passed away. If I spent a year and followed the government's mandate and didn't see my family, and my dad died, you know the regret I would have the rest of my fucking life. And I didn't. I followed my own rules. I knew what was best for me and my family, and I spent time with my family. And I'm so glad I did that. So you have to do what's right for you. That's my mindset with that.
Yeah, I think that's it's certainly a good general ethos to have, because people know, like every pretty much every civilization in the history of language has had the same core principles of law, right? Like murder, for example, has been illegal. Now, how it's defined is different, but the idea of the unauthorized taking of a human life has been criminalized by pretty much every culture, except for, there's a couple of outliers. People know what's right and what's wrong. Like, we don't need to be told what's right and wrong by power-hungry people who run for office. I mean, that's a ridiculous premise, right? So I'm certainly with you on the idea of starting at the lowest possible level and, trying to turn people into leaders and firebrands for that ideology. So when you were talking about parenting earlier, you didn't say it specifically, but what you're alluding to is that a lot of people parent by edict instead of by example. Now you need to do both, right? You need to set clear rules and give clear guidance, but you also have to live the same life that you're asking other people to live. Otherwise, they're going to know you're full of shit. You know what I mean? Yes. So when excuse me, when Gavin Newsom in California has everybody locked down and then goes to the French Laundry, with all of his buddies, and nobody wears a mask, everybody knows that he doesn't really believe that it's dangerous. You know what I mean? So I mean, even if he was correct and it was dangerous, nobody's going to believe it after that. Yeah. And I think I know for a fact that leading by example produces a better quality follower than any other methodology. And I know that to be a leader, you have to know how to follow first, right? Because you have to be able to communicate to people who are following. Starting that at home is one thing, but I think if you're a parent, that's certainly part of your everyday life. But even if you're not a parent, let's say you're a teenager right now and you're listening to this and you're wondering, how does any of this apply to me? The fact that you've gone out of your way to find more information on how to improve the world around you makes you a leader by definition. You weren't satisfied with the status quo. You weren't satisfied with being a dull, compliant worker bee, right? Which is, the American pioneer spirit. And when I say American, I mean all of North America. It's been like that. People here have been pioneers, been hardworking as fuck for a long ass time. And you're 14, 15 years old. You're in high school, maybe you're in middle school or whatever. The people around you, once you start searching out answers and being skeptical about things and processing information and learning how to think and not just what to think, people will start to look to you for answers. And I'm not saying that everybody has to make short videos on how to do things and post them on the internet. It's not about that, but that one-on-one interaction and groups of people watching as you unapologetically do what you think is right. That's a very powerful thing. It's psychology like that is contagious, and it is ultimately rebellion against herd mentality. And herd mentality is one of the most dangerous things. I mean, we used to call these people lemmings. You know what I mean? And it was an insult. And now
Yeah.
it's like you jump on board and you're part of whatever the current thing is, and that's some kind of social currency. It doesn't make any sense, like how that happened. But it does make sense because that's what governments have been trying to get us to do for years, forever. They want compliance. The Roman Colosseum wasn't built to sell tickets and make money for the Roman government so they could, fund infrastructure projects. It was meant as a distraction because life sucked and they wanted people to be a little bit happier than they were so they wouldn't rebel. It was really that simple. So why would there be any impetus on government or business to improve conditions, to make products better or cheaper, to stop wasting our money on stupid bullshit, to stop interfering in our daily lives, if there isn't some kind of cost, some kind of penalty for doing that? You know what I mean? There has to be some penalty and some reward for doing the wrong and right thing. And right now, as far as it goes here in America, at least in the United States, there's very little penalty for a politician to do, let's say, insider trading, for example, or to, like with Joe Manchin this week, who said repeatedly he wouldn't vote for Build Back Better or the Green New Deal. And then they changed the name of the bill from the Green New Deal to the Inflation Reduction Act, and he votes for it. Like, there's got to be a penalty for that. That guy has to go. He has to be not elected when he comes up again, but he probably will be, right?
Well, I mean, you go back to, we talk about Canada. I don't know if you never heard the story before, but Trudeau put a ton of money, government money, towards a charity. I think it's the We or something like that. I can't remember the exact name. It was the charity to support and develop the youth of Canada, and a ton of money was put towards government money, our money, citizens' money, towards this charity, millions and millions. And then it came out that his mom was paid like $200,000 for a speech. His cousins were all paid $200,000 for speeches. And it was a whole line of his family all being paid for these massive amounts for speeches. And these are not even professional speakers. And that was brought into the public and swiped under a carpet a couple months later and never talked about it ever again. And it's just constantly, there's so many of these things. If you sit there and open up the books and look at how much shit has happened over the last 3-4 years, and they're just swiped under. We could go and there's tons of stuff. You look at the Canadian educational system and all these Inuit schools and Native Indian schools and all this stuff that happened with the Catholic system years back. Then they're all coming to light now with the burial grounds. And there's so much stuff that just brushed under the carpet. And then when they are brought to light, they're just hushed up pretty quickly. They're hushed up as quick as possible to stop the spread and stop any form of change, right? And that's constantly. And when you're going back to even like one thing I wanted to talk about was the 14, 16-year-olds, like our youth. Yeah, it does start at home 100%. And that's 100% what I'm in favor for. And I agree with, and the mentoring indirectly and direct mentoring as parents. But our educational system, this is something we talked about at the beginning. There's 3 topics I always say, Dan, that should be part of the curriculum in our educational system: sales, public speaking, and networking. If those 3 things were taught from grade 9 to grade 12, right through our high school systems, how much better leaders will we have? How much better educators will we have? How much more entrepreneurs will we have? Instead, they're teaching this. I'm looking at my daughter going through high school, my son's starting high school next year, and I'm looking at the curriculum, helping my daughter. I'm like, none of this shit I forgot about. It's been so many years, but none of this shit you're going to use in the real world.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to be a chemist or what are you going to use to have this stuff? And they're not teaching the leadership skills. They're not teaching the public speaking, being able to communicate with people. A lot of kids, they're stuck in front of a computer all day. They're stuck in their basement playing video games. They don't have the public speaking skills. They don't have the communication skills. They get into the real world. They don't know how to talk to people anymore. And then what does that do? That forces you to follow along the herd because you just want to be part of something.
Yeah.
So it's a lot has to do with our educational system too, right?
Yeah, 100%. Oh, well, we talked about this earlier in the show. It's just a factory to build compliant workers. That's all it really is. Maybe there's no solution for that from the public standpoint. You could put your kids in private school and stuff like that, but you know, no system of education is going to be perfect. And the major studies on public versus private education found some pretty good things, like smaller classroom sizes obviously help because you get more one-on-one learning, more specific curriculum and less general curriculum builds better students in general because you have to dive into a specific topic and learn how to learn, and then you can pretty much learn other things on your own. That's one of the things they found. But the biggest predictor of academic success wasn't any of those things. It wasn't race or gender. It wasn't social class or wealth. It was parental involvement in the process. Like how much time did the parents spend with the child in their education? That was the biggest predictor of academic success. So if we know that, then we know, regardless of how fucked up the education system might be at large, you still have plenty of opportunity to teach your kid. And the good thing about this is you don't have to make them mouthy or disagreeable. Just make them confident in knowing that they know how to learn, that they're doing things the correct way, and you can be respectful. You don't have to be a dick to get your point across and stuff like this.
Yeah.
But when you can tell people are trying to program you, then you can resist that, and other people will see you resisting it, and they will resist it as well.
Yeah. Being a leader.
Yeah. And
100%.
I think that we have these weird ideas about leadership in the West. For a long time, it was like if you were born with the right last name, then you're a leader. Then it's like if you've got the right business success or military success, then you're a leader. But frankly, I know plenty of business people and plenty of people from the military that are fucking idiots, and people that I would definitely not follow. So the thing that I want to do with this idea of leadership is make the message ubiquitous. Like the target audience for these ideas on leadership is everyone, whether you're, a teenager just starting to figure out who you are as a person, or you're getting ready to retire, whatever it is. All these lessons apply. And it's the very simple definition is a leader is someone who puts others before themselves and puts the truth before their own comfort. That to me is a leader. And, they set clear expectations for themselves and others. They admit when they're wrong. They admit when their opponent is right, which is also an important trait to have, because otherwise you have to pretend like you're right when you're not because you chose the wrong side. That's fucking dumb. People think leadership is giving orders or punishing the disobedient or rewarding the obedient. But that doesn't even scrape the surface of what it really is. You know what I mean? Being a leader it's like everything else. Like people want to go on a diet to lose weight. No, a diet is what you eat on a regular basis. It's not a fucking thing you do for 2 weeks.
No, it's a process. Yeah.
And being a leader is something that happens every single day, regardless of what your status is. The vast majority of people, other than maybe being a parent, will never be in a true leadership position in society in their life. They're not going to be a politician. They're not going to be a CEO. The vast majority of people won't ever hold any of these formal leadership positions. But every single person that can hear the sound of my voice, whether it's all the time or in certain situations, is a leader, right? People look to you, people that don't know what's going on. Like the dumbest motherfucker on earth who's done something for a couple of weeks is going to have something to tell the smartest motherfucker on earth who hasn't done it before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it begins and ends, I think, as you alluded to before, with discipline. You know what I mean? That's the common theme in every business book, and every self-help book, and every dieting book. It's always the same thing. It's about discipline. And I think this is the part that's ubiquitous, and it's the thing that you said earlier about instilling discipline in the kids at the earliest possible opportunity, and then exercising that discipline as they grow older. That's probably the most important part of raising a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me jump on something there.
Yep.
And everything you're saying there is there's two things I always think of when I look at my kids, and something I've tried to teach them from a very young age is, and this goes to exactly not following the herd mentality, is understanding that it's okay to ask a question if you have it in your head. It's okay to have an open dialogue, a conversation with somebody that you disagree with. And I think a lot of people put themselves in these little bubbles where they don't know how to properly ask a question, and that fear of asking that question sometimes just makes them follow a path. And I think we have to, from a very young age, teach our kids, hey, like, if you have a question, if you have a concern, if you have something that doesn't feel right or doesn't make sense, ask that question and let somebody explain it to you. And at that point, then judge whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense to you. So being open for conversation and asking questions. And I think our youth, they need to start that on a regular basis, because right now it's just social media. I add a comment. And then you get the negativity. And a lot of people are scared to ask the question, scared to open up, or scared to put something important out there because they were so scared of the hate that's going to come with it. And I was just interviewing a gentleman. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, these YouTube videos that exploded from the kid. It was not from a kid; it was an actual gentleman behind the kid, and it was kid called Kid President.
Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
So these erupted. So it was a gentleman, Brad Montague, started creating. He got his nephew started creating these videos of Kid President. They exploded to the point where Obama invited them to the White House. Beyonce invited them to dinner. They saw Oprah. These things got millions and millions of views. This whole series of Kid President, and they were just done for fun. But it was also there's a mindset behind it. It was to teach the younger generation lessons on how to be good to people, how to treat people good. How there was lessons behind them all, and through the whole process, when I was talking, I go, did you get any, like, how much hatred did you get towards that? Because you're always going to get the trolls and all this. He goes, we got tons of hatred. And he goes, every time we would get a hatred, I would send a private message with a photo with a person's name holding on a piece of paper saying, Dan, I love you. I don't care if you don't love me. I love you back. And he would send this to every single person who would leave a negative message, a DM. And he says, how many of those people that would open a conversation, and then they would open up and start a conversation. And 5 minutes later, they would explain why they felt that or why they said that, and their mind would change. So having that open dialogue with people is so valid. And I think a lot of people don't take that opportunity of a negative comment or a negative moment to turn into an open conversation of why you feel that way.
Sure. Yeah. The comment you made about fear to ask a question or to make a statement, funneling somebody down a path maybe they don't even agree with, is really interesting. I mean, that's social pressure to force compliance. That's what that is, right? It's group It's groupthink. It's group psychology. It's like the fear speaking out. It's essentially the ideological version of the bystander effect, right? Where everyone assumes this or that, and instead of just saying something very obvious out loud. We have so many stories about this. The elephant in the room is a literal story, or the emperor's new clothes. Like, we have so many anecdotes about this throughout human history, and it's one of the great failures of Western society is that we have managed to systematically unlearn lessons that we've learned in very harsh conditions over the years because of our own desire for comfort. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, it pretty much, unless you are, I guess, just an Epicurus apologist. Most people who have written philosophy don't agree that searching out comfort and pleasure are the best way to go through life. I mean, the vast majority of philosophers would say that's a silly way to go through life, right? Yeah. For all the reasons, but if you If you get addicted to the pleasure, then the event no longer is meaningful, if that makes sense. So you get addicted to the dopamine hit, not the actual thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem for people because they can't. I think it's why so many very successful people end up committing suicide because they align their happiness with these things that are more ephemeral, right? They're not necessarily real, but that's not how it works. Like your brain rewards and penalizes you with chemicals, right?
Yeah.
And it is a system that has been developed over the course of about 250,000 years. So the idea of saying, well, I feel good when I do this. What do you mean feel good? Like physically you feel good? Like you can breathe better? That's good. Sure. But if you feel good, meaning it's just like an ephemeral, I just feel happier when I do. Like you should really pause and examine what you're doing there and why you're doing it. Because chances are it's not a good idea. And it's why so many people in the philosophy space now are encouraging people to seek out discomfort, physically and, philosophically, seek out discomfort.
I always say, I mean, in the highest stress moments of your life, you create your greatest growth. And you need stress in your life to create growth. Anything that's beautiful in this world that's grown has that moment of stress, that moment of and I always talk about my wife to this, and this is why from day one we've put our children in a situation where they've had to earn. We put them in a situation where discipline, not a negative, we're hitting them discipline, but a discipline in the way where they understand the rules, they understand the process. Because I see a lot of our friends of ours and their children they've done well for themselves, so their children are given everything. And I'm like, these kids have never had a bad day in their life. They've never had a moment to earn something or stress for something. How are they going to deal with adversity when it first hits them as an adult? And that's my biggest fear. And that was my biggest fear with my kids, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's why from day one, and still my kids are very privileged. They're extremely privileged. They were given way more. I came from a very blue collar factory family, and my kids have been given way more than I ever thought as a kid I would ever have. And I'm proud that I'm able to give them to them, but I make sure they understand that. I make sure from day one, my kids will go to a mall and they're the first ones opening up the door for the first person. They've built these habits. They're going to become leaders as they grow up. And I think a lot of children are right now going to that. They're so privileged that they don't understand the minute shit hits the fan, they're not going to know how to deal with it as adults.
Yeah.
And that's a scary situation because that's a huge generation that are growing up that are all going to hit at the same time.
Yeah, we may be in even more trouble than we're in now. And it's a good point. You need stress to create growth in your life. It's true for every living organism, right? The reason a tree grows into the shape that it grows is because it's reaching out for sunlight and water. The reason that grapes become sweet is because they're what's called struggling on the vine for that sugar, so they absorb and retain all the sugar. The reason that you get smarter or grow muscles on your body is through struggle and discomfort. I can't. Struggle and discomfort is dinner and pleasure is dessert. And I think people should probably think of it that way because otherwise, you're just eating cake all the time and you're going to be a fat dummy with diabetes. I mean, it's really that simple.
It is that simple. That's a scary part. It is that simple, but people still don't get it.
Yeah.
That's the scary part of it, right?
Well, I mean, so we've here recently we've systematically moralized that kind of behavior, though. It's like, everybody's talking about self-care. Like, shut the fuck up, man. I don't want to hear that shit. I don't want to hear you talk about self-care. Self-care is realizing that you probably have it better than most people, which if you live in America, you're in the top 1% of the top 1% of human beings on earth, regardless of how bad your situation is, and finding a way to turn your pain and suffering into empathy for other people. That is self-care, because that's the way you solve your fucking problems, is through helping other people. It's not about you. But instead, our entire society pats people on the shoulder. Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
that's the victim mentality,
Yeah.
right? And I think social media praises on that. If you put up, if you see a post where somebody's, I just got a job, you'll get 3 likes. Oh, my husband has broke up, my husband has left me, you'll get 100
Yeah.
questions and all. It's people are hugged and created around being a victim.
Mm.
They're not rewarded for this. Very rarely you'll get rewarded for doing great stuff. If you are rewarded for doing great stuff, you're being rewarded by high achievers, people that are in the same boat as you, that are trying to achieve much as you. Because if when I look at somebody that's successful, if I see your podcast killing, you're getting millions of downloads, I'm like, that's fucking awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. I love seeing that. It just makes me happy because it gives me an opportunity to achieve that. There is hope to achieve that. So for people to look at somebody's success and be like, screw this, I'm not so happy to see him happy. But when somebody's a victim, oh my God, that poor person. That's, man, social media just magnifies that to a different level, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I try to tell people all the time to allow yourself to be inspired instead of intimidated by the success of other people, because
Yeah.
basically by them succeeding, what they've done is take all the risk and create a roadmap for you to succeed as well.
100%.
You should see that as a benefit as a human being, especially these days. I mean, more so than ever before in a creator economy. We got to get out of here. Before we do you have any last words of wisdom for the audience?
I said it before, man. I mean, keys to success is just work fucking hard at what you want. Stop being a bitch and complaining about everything. Just go out and do it, and just be good to people, man. Put a smile on somebody's face today, man. Just be nice to people, because the world could be a better place if we're all just nicer to each other. That's all it is, man. Simple, simple, simple.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming today. I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. And thanks to all of you for listening. This has been Citizen.